Hi, everybody, and welcome to Resilience Brilliance, where we speak about resilience journeys and share tips and tricks on how to build that resilience muscle, which is so important to navigate life's turbulence. I'm Jenna Taylor, resilience strategist and founder of Resilience Brilliance podcasts and programs. Every month, I offer free live training on resilience with an open Q&A session. Sign up with links in the show notes and also in the link right above here. My show was born out of my own story of survival. After a traumatic brain injury, I couldn't walk, talk, or even remember. I had to start from scratch. Within months, I fought my way back, first to independence, then to writing for IBM Watson Health and earning a six-figure career. My mantra became, reclaim my life, and it's the heartbeat of everything I do. Resilience Brilliance is for anyone struggling with adversity, burnout, loss, or the weight of life's challenges. The show delivers inspiring stories, practical tools, and expert insights so you can overcome, rebuild, and reclaim your own life with heart, humility, and humor. And today, I'm excited to introduce you to Sarah Dawkins. She's going to be telling us about her own personal healing story. I want you to be aware that we do have some trigger warnings. We're going to talk about burnout, mental health, addiction, recovery, trauma, abuse, and suicide ideation. And with that, I am delighted to introduce you to Sarah Dawkins. Sarah, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you, Jenna. It's great to be here with you and your audience.
Please tell us a little bit about your history and what brought you to what you're doing today.
Gosh. My mom was a nurse and I liked the idea of helping people in their vulnerable times. So I trained as a nurse and qualified in 2001. We moved to America to try a different country, try a different life in 2004. And in 2005, one of my nurse colleagues questioned my use of pharmaceuticals at home. So for the first 41 years of my life, all I knew was doctors, pills, and hospitals. There was nothing outside of that view. That's all I knew. When you're sick, you need a doctor and a pill and a diagnosis. So being open-minded, I went home and started researching on the internet, what else is there? Is there a problem with pharmaceuticals? And because that was the way I'd lived my life. And I'd had many chronic health problems and just used the pharmaceuticals. So that led me into my own self-healing journey because I realized the power of our own body, which made me very conflicted at work because at home I'm living a natural, more holistic, healthier lifestyle. And I'd stopped using pharmaceuticals as I started healing my mind and body. But at work, I was still following doctor's orders, giving pills and supporting people following investigations and surgery. That led me to spiral into a deep, dark depression with suicidal thoughts, which frightened the hell out of me. And from there, my doctor wanted to medicate me. I'd already done antidepressants following the birth of my son, so I knew I didn't want to go that route. And I knew that I'd healed so much to this point that I could get through this and heal it. I just didn't know how, but I had that deep-seated belief within me that I could. And it took me about a year, maybe 18 months to actually start seeing an outside world because I was in this deep, dark, black vacuum. And it's like intuitively, one day I was out walking the dog and I looked up and there was buds on the trees, there was flowers on the floor. I heard the stream at the side of the path. And it's like there's something outside of me. And it's just, I don't even know what made me look, but I recognized that it's spring. And then I started to practice gratitude and mindfulness, but intuitively, I didn't know I was doing it at the time. And it was a few months down the road when I look back and I'm like, oh, that's what I'm doing. And then I started meditating. Had no idea what meditation was like. So I sat on the floor like, oh, and this voice inside my head, I'm like, oh, that's clearly I'm not meant to meditate. This is really challenging. But actually I went on YouTube and found some guided meditations that shut that voice up and just meditated on finding peace inside at first. And then looking at what I could do outside of the hospital because I'd aligned myself with Sarah the nurse. And who am I if I'm not a nurse? So I'd come through and healed all these health problems. But then I'd hit this, well, who am I? Authenticity challenge. And I worked that out. But in the meantime, I set up my first business as a nurse entrepreneur, still a nurse, had to sign the register every year to say I'm still a nurse, but I wasn't in the hospital. So it was a great sidestep. My business was doing really well, and I was acknowledged for the work that I was doing. I won awards, but it still wasn't aligned. And that's when I realized I needed to step away from nursing. So I trained as a coach and gave up my nursing license, and then closed my first business down and opened up my second business where I am now.
And when was that?
I opened my second business when I was 56, 5 years ago. And I opened up my first business back in 2012. So I set up my first business in 2012 when I believe I was 48, and I was a nurse entrepreneur, and I won awards for my work, but I was still a nurse. So I still had to sign that register, but I was no longer in the hospital. I realized I needed to step away from nursing completely when I realized who I was at my core and stopped aligning with Sarah the nurse and became Sarah the free spirit, do whatever I want to do. And I went and did a coaching course, closed down that first business and set up my second business when I was 56 as a coach. And I feel more soul aligned now. I'm doing the work I feel that I'm meant to do. And I'm no longer that nurse. And actually, I don't have the anxiety that I thought I would have giving up my registration.
That's great. And, it's interesting. I think there are so many things, like you mentioned at the beginning, that your mother was a nurse and you became a nurse, and it kind of was part of probably ingrained in you from a very young age that you were going to be a nurse. There are a lot of people that are listening that feel like there's family influence and we become something because of influence. We're steered in a certain direction because of what our options are post high school. Can we go to college? What can our parents afford? What can we afford? Some people go into military to get a collegiate education. Some people go to secondary. Some people can go anywhere they want. Some people have no options whatsoever. I mean, so we have different pathways, but I think there's so much family origin that plays into our journey. And when we finally become in a position to do what aligns with our soul, there's a freedom that resonates within us. You want to talk a little bit about that and what that meant for you on your personal journey?
Absolutely. I mean, when I first started talking about stepping outside the medical model and what I was doing at home to some of my nurse colleagues, to my family, the majority of people thought I was crazy because, here I'm a nurse working with medicine, trained in medicine and procedures. And now I'm talking about not using it. They just like, you're crazy. But that's that was their path. And I knew it was the right path for me. It just felt right. But when I surrendered my nursing license, again, my family thought I was crazy because I've worked so hard to get to where I was. I'd become a senior nurse, and I was in critical care, cardiothoracic and recovery. So, a real specialty, high risk occupation. And I loved it, but I still saw me confined in that medical model. And I wasn't allowed to talk about what I was doing at home and help people that way. I had to follow the guidelines of what the hospital did. So stepping outside of that into my first business really felt good because, first of all, I'd meditated on becoming an entrepreneur, and then I stepped into it. So I was realizing something that I'd meditated on. And winning the awards, I won a local award at the university where I'd done my training. And then I won a national award. I came second in a national UK freelancers competition, which was brilliant. And for me at the time, because I was coming out of the depression, it was like a validation, if you like. I needed that validation that what I'm doing is working and that I'm a good person and that I'm capable of doing what I'm doing. And that gave me that validation. And that was part of my own healing journey as well, because I saw in that I'm still looking external validation to validate who I am at my core. So when I was working in that business, I was making good money, I've been validated for it, but I was still a nurse. And that really held me back because, I knew I'd always wanted to be a nurse, and I thought I would be a nurse until I died. But here I am now thinking, well, I need to step away from nursing, which was that whole authenticity battle. And that I had to strip away some deep layers. Why have I become who I've become now? What influences has had on me to make my behavior, the way I dress, the way I speak, what I do? And I had to start stripping that back. And it was only when I did my coach training that I understood the emotional side of healing. Because until then, I'd started in what I call a physical pillar with nutrition, hydration, sleep, and exercise to improve my health. Then I'd had the mental health problems. So I learned about gratitude, mindfulness, meditation in the mental pillar. And as I'd meditated, I reconnected back with that little voice inside me. So then I'd found there's a spiritual pillar about the community that I'm aligned with and my connection back to myself, to that little voice. But I had no idea about the emotional pillar until I did that coach training. And we were taken on an internal journey to find a trauma and to look at it through the eyes of who we were at that time, at the age that we were at that time, to be able to understand it with the knowledge and skills that we've got now. And I came out of that meditation, and honestly, Jenna, it was like somebody just lifted a 10-ton weight off my shoulders. It was so refreshing. And I understood then, because I'd lived my whole life in victim mode. I'm a victim of my circumstances, broken home and divorced parents and backwards and forwards and moving around the country. It was only then when I did that emotional work, I realized that actually my parents did the best they could with what they've got. And that was life changing, because suddenly I'm not a victim of my circumstances. I understand what happened in my life and why it happened. And now I can step into becoming who I am here to be. And so I have gratitude for what I've been through, because without any of that, well, first of all, I wouldn't have learned all those unhealthy coping mechanisms, but actually being able to heal those and step forward into who I'm here to be is tremendously empowering and humbling. And it just feels so good.
You bring up a really good point, and it's something that is a strong principle that I teach in my programs, is that victim mentality. Victim mentality is the biggest sabotager that people can employ in their health and well-being. And the minute we let go of that victim mentality is the moment that we have momentous healing. So to have you, for all you, this is not a planned conversation, and we did not plan to talk about victim mentalities. This is just a serendipitous conversation and a topic that just happened to come up. We're very much aligned in our conversation for sure. But it's when we can come from a place of healing, where we understand, like you were saying, people did the best they could with what they had and where they were and what they knew, and not take it personally. It's like we have to take a role. And yes, somebody may have contributed to something in our life, but we have a choice to either hang on to the baggage associated to something that somebody had a role in our life. But we have that choice to either hang on to it or let it go. And the longer we hang on to it, the more impact that has on our life. And it's not going to be a positive impact. So thank you for bringing up that role of the victim mentality in your life and how important it was and what an impact it made on your life. So thank you for bringing that up.
It is very freeing. And as I say, I felt like this just massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders.
Yes. Yeah. So what prompted you to start this healing journey? I mean, what was that crucible moment where you just knew something had to change?
It was that nurse colleague back in 2005 when we were living and working in America that questioned my use of pharmaceuticals. And at first she was like, why would you say that? I'm a nurse. She's a nurse. It's what we do. It's normal. It's accepted. And I think having that open mind, I went home and that kick-started my journey into research to think, well, what's wrong with pharmaceuticals? But also, what else is there if I don't take pharmaceuticals? So that was a massive, not just a rabbit hole, that was like 10 rabbit warrens, It's just like every night reading and reading and researching and researching. And just some of the information that came up was like, it was mind blowing. I'm not going to lie. I would go across to my husband in his office when I'd read something. I'm like, you're never going to believe this, but listen to what I've just read. And it was just literally every night I would go to him, and because I didn't know any of this, I was being raised by a nurse and then went into the medical model through nursing school. So we were never taught any of this information that I was reading.
You would think that would be, in your
You'd think, yes.
counterintuitive.
It is. But then if you look at how the medical model is funded, it makes sense.
Yeah, you're right. Of course. Well, tell me a little bit about the moment you realized that the emotional trauma played into your symptoms, looking back at your past and the symptoms that you experienced.
So that first started during that meditation when I was training to be a coach with the group, and that internal journey to find the trauma, see it through a different perspective, and then that weight being lifted. That made me realize that actually there's an emotional element to healing too. And that took me a while then to extrapolate that out into some of the symptoms, because I'd healed a whole slew of health problems, psoriasis, eczema, acid reflux, candida, chronic joint pain, underactive thyroid, burned out adrenal glands, depression with suicidal thoughts, and PTSD. So I'd healed all of that.
You also had blood pressure, the low
No,
blood pressure. No?
very low blood pressure, yes.
Yes.
Yes, because my adrenal glands were burnt out. My blood pressure was regularly 80/40, incredibly low. But I was there for years, so it became my norm, in air quotes, if you like. And I only realized that as I was healing my adrenal glands, that actually it was because I'd burnt them out my blood pressure would drop so low. So it was as I realized the emotional aspect of healing, because I'd only worked with, as I said, the physical, the mental, and the spiritual pillars that I've defined, I went back and looked into the healing that I'd done and added an extra dimension by going into issues that had come up, triggers that had come up within me. And rather than looking at them from the mental, the physical, the spiritual aspects, I added in the emotional aspects of what is it that's causing me to feel like this, because it's not a physical thing. It's not related to food, and it's not related to exercise, because I'd got anger and sadness and frustration. And I realized that emotional underpinning was there in a lot of the joint pains that I had, like a chronic low back pain. And I went to a physiotherapist at first, who told me I've got a bulging disc, as my doctor told me I'd got a bulging disc. And they did red light therapy. My doctor prescribed painkillers. And for years, I struggled with that. And it was only once I'd done the emotional healing, I realized that low part of our back, our spine, is linked to our root chakra, which is linked to safety, security, and finance. And at the time, I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel secure, and we had no money. So it's no wonder that kept coming up as a pain point. And then I had a frozen shoulder one year, and then the following year, the other shoulder was frozen. And of course, that's linked to the weight of the world on our shoulders, with the emotions of carrying that. So it was, looking back, I saw the emotional element that was playing out in some of the symptoms that I was experiencing.
Yeah, that's a lot of symptoms to go through. What kind of time frame was it for you to heal yourself from all of these symptoms?
I think that first of all, the psoriasis, the eczema, and the acid reflux was about 1 month as I tweaked my diet and cut out initially like junk food, lactose, and gluten. And those healed really fast. The rest was over a time period of probably 10 to 12, maybe even 15 years. It was just a slow progression of working out what was going on. So I didn't understand the chronic joint pains until I'd learned about the emotional. And I just kept really working with the symptoms rather than healing them through a chiropractor, through manipulation, through exercises, rather than taking painkillers. But once I understood the emotional aspects of it, I was then able to work with what was going on then in my body.
That's fantastic.
Thank
The body is so powerful, and there's that expression, we should treat it as a temple, what we ingest, what we do, but so oftentimes we abuse our body. We
Yeah,
abuse our mind, our self-talk is negative. There's a lot of self-talk, there's a lot of toxins that we put into our body. I just was in, and I'm not sure if you know Dr. Layla Talabian. She just had a 4-hour workshop on Saturday, and she was talking about food as medicine, and she
yeah,
was talking about all the different things that are in certain foods, and as a researcher and a cancer researcher, and how these non-food food items are in foods, they're carcinogens and they're linked to cancers. There's just so much that we put into our body, and if we remove these things from our body and our diets, and we take better care of ourselves, then we can heal.
absolutely. And it's not just what we're putting into our body as well, it's what we put onto our body because our skin absorbs it. And
Yes.
yet, so
Yep.
many products that are for sale on the shop shelves are toxic.
Mhm.
And it's
Yep.
beyond belief that these chemicals are allowed to be put into the products that we use on our skin and around our home and in our laundry. And it's shocking.
Yes, it is. Yes. And in fact, one of the things that we talked about was makeup, women's makeup
Yes.
and hair products and things that we put every day. And here's one, I didn't even think about, like the nail polish, the
Yeah.
things that we do, like to feel pretty and to
Yeah.
pamper ourselves. Wonder what toxins are involved in this. Oh, goodness. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And
There's just
sorry, back in 2012, when I was down the line in my healing journey, my thyroid stopped working. That was one of the things that prompted me to detoxify my life, my cleaning products, my beauty products, my makeup. I use all natural products now and I make my own. I make my own creams. I make my own, I use white vinegar as a softener. I use bicarbonate of soda to help cleanse my washing. And there's so much that we can do to help ourselves, but we're just not taught this.
no, we became into this convenience society.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know growing up, my grandmother was a depression era, and she taught me recycling and reusing, reduce, reuse, recycle before. Those were the 3 R's. And we used to mock her. And now I think about the values that my grandmother instilled in me when I was a small child, and how she was right. She was just right. And they didn't they didn't have that convenience. Everything mattered, and
Yeah.
we as a society have really gotten away from it. But yes, there's toxins everywhere, like what we put on our skin, what we ingest, and it's like I said, the convenience of it all and the commercialization of everything too. Well, you have it in your backdrop, your books. Let's talk about your book.
Thank you. My book is aimed at people like I used to be who had no idea of anything outside of doctors, pharmaceuticals, and hospitals because that was my life for 41 years. So I wrote my own healing, everything I'd healed when I was coming out of that dark depression. I'm like, people need to know that we can heal all of these problems even when the doctors say we can't. And I wrote about 10,000 words straight off my own story, what I'd done, how I'd healed, what I'd healed. And then that little voice sat, on my shoulder went, who are you? You're not an author. Nobody wants to listen to that. So I shut my computer and it stayed there for 5 years
Mm.
because who was I? But one day I woke up and a little voice in my head went, no, you've got to write your book and it's got to be other people. So I reached out on social media and, I just like, has anybody done this self-healing thing? It's a new concept to me. Is anybody else doing it? Have you been doing it a long time? What have you healed? 74 people came back from healing things like ALS, multiple sclerosis, autoimmune, cancer, Lyme, allergies, asthma, endometriosis, so many health problems. And they all wrote their own stories in my book to share with the world that healing happens even when doctors say it doesn't.
It's so true. Your book is available on Amazon. Is it also available on your website? Where else can people buy it?
On my website, it links out to Amazon, but it's also in Barnes and Noble, and you
Okay,
can order it in Waterstones as well.
great. what would you like the audience to take away from your experience and your story?
I would love your audience to believe in themselves, to believe in their ability to heal. And if you break it down to the smallest thing, look at when you get a bruise. You don't do anything and your body heals it. So if it can heal that, why can it not heal anything else? It absolutely can. And myself, the people in my book and the people on my podcast have all healed, and it's possible. And what's possible for us is possible for you too. And sometimes it can feel that the world feels so heavy. And I've been there, I understand it. Yes, it can. But we are the only people that can help us. Other people can support us, but nobody can do it for us. So if you can step out of your comfort zone and start supporting your mind, your body, your soul, you can heal and your body will heal. And I would love your listeners to take that away, that their belief in their healing is key to their healing.
Yes. The power of the mind is an incredible thing.
Yes.
And we have to, whatever we believe happens. If we believe we can, we can. If we believe we can't, we can't. We have that power, and it's between our ears, and it's a very potent thing. So we have to be very careful what we believe and what we think, because it will directly correlate to the output that happens. So very important.
My website's a great place, www.sarahdawkins.com.
Also, you have some free resources on your website, and you have a podcast. What is your podcast called?
I rebranded it in January, so it's now called Mind Body Medicine for Self-Healers.
Awesome. I will put that up right up here as well, and it will be in the show notes. And I want to remind everybody that I do have a monthly live session on resilience. You can sign up with the link right up here. And I want to thank you again, Sarah, for joining me today. I'm glad that we could get this scheduled and on the calendar. I know we have a big time gap between us. So thank you very much for joining. Thank you again for all of you listeners, watchers. Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned. Until next time, be real, be resilient, reclaim your life. Ciao.